The wind cut through the quiet autumn street, scattering yellow leaves across cracked sidewalks and whispering against the faded brick walls of a forgotten neighborhood. Officer Daniel Brooks had been on the force for 12 years, and in that time, he had faced crime scenes, car accidents, and desperate 911 calls that left their mark on him. But nothing in his career had prepared him for the sight that stopped him cold that morning. Ahead, beneath the golden canopy of falling leaves, a small figure moved slowly, her bare feet pressing against the cold pavement. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. Her tangled blonde hair clung to tear-streaked cheeks, and in one tiny hand she gripped a torn plastic bag stuffed with empty bottles and scraps of trash. What truly froze Daniel, though, was the makeshift sling across her chest, a worn blue t-shirt knotted at her shoulder, holding a baby so tiny its head fit perfectly beneath her chin. The infant's face was pale, lips dry, as though even its dreams carried the weight of exhaustion. Daniel's heart seemed to slow in his chest as the world around him blurred at the edges. He had seen poverty before, had witnessed children living on the margins, but never like this. Never a child so young, carrying another life as if she were both sister and mother, scavenging for scraps of survival while the world looked away. That morning, he had been responding to a routine call. Someone had reported a suspicious figure near the park dumpsters. He expected to find a vagrant, maybe a group of teenagers causing trouble. Instead, he found this fragile portrait of desperation, a sight that struck deeper than any crime scene he had ever faced. The little girl moved with slow precision, stooping to pick up a half-crushed soda can before slipping it into her bag. Her movements were mechanical, practiced, as though this task had defined her life for far longer than her small years should allow. Her oversized shirt hung loosely from her frame, the collar sliding down one thin shoulder, exposing the sharp outline of her bones beneath. The baby in the sling stirred and whimpered softly before tucking itself closer against her chest, as if seeking warmth from the only shelter it had. Daniel noticed the girl's lips were cracked and chapped, her cheeks raw from the cold, and something deep inside him twisted painfully. This wasn't just hunger. This wasn't just poverty. This was abandonment. At first, she didn't notice him. Her eyes were locked on the gutters, searching for anything that might hold the smallest value. But when she finally did look up, the fear in her gaze was immediate and unyielding, slamming down like a wall. Wide brown eyes darted over him quickly, his uniform, his badge, the holstered gun at his hip, and in an instant, her body stiffened, her small hand tightening around the flimsy plastic bag. Daniel understood the look instantly. It wasn't just fear of strangers. It was fear of authority, of the very people meant to protect her. He had seen it before in foster children who had been shuffled from home to home, children who had learned to expect that adults and power meant separation, loss, and pain. So he didn't move closer. He didn't raise his voice or demand her attention. Instead, he stayed a few feet away, lowering himself into a crouch so he wouldn't tower over her fragile frame. He watched as her shoulders trembled against a sharp gust of wind, the branches above rattling like brittle bones. The baby's breathing was shallow but steady, the faint rise and fall of its chest barely visible beneath the knotted shirt. The street was quiet, almost eerily so, and the sound of leaves skittering across the pavement seemed louder than anything else. In that moment, Daniel thought of his own daughter. She was 6 years old, safe at home, probably curled on the couch in her pajamas watching morning cartoons with a warm blanket draped across her lap. The contrast cut through him like ice. His daughter, protected and loved, had the security of a childhood. This little girl, standing barefoot in the cold with a baby tied to her chest, had been robbed of hers. And so, with the weight of that realization pressing down on him, Daniel finally let the questions slip from his lips, soft, careful, almost a whisper, as he asked the child her name. Her voice was so soft he almost didn't hear it, but it wasn't only the words that pierced him. It was the way they carried the weight of a story far too heavy for a child to bear. In halting, broken phrases, she explained that she and the baby, her brother, had been living behind the old laundromat for weeks. Their mother had gone out to find food and never returned. That had been 3 nights ago. Since then, she had been doing everything in her small power to keep her brother alive, feeding him scraps she managed to find, wrapping him in whatever pieces of cloth she could scavenge to keep the cold from stealing him away. And now, out of sheer desperation, she had begun collecting bottles because she had overheard someone say they could be traded for money. Daniel felt his throat tighten until it was nearly impossible to breathe. With every word she spoke, he realized this was not just a heartbreaking story. It was a crisis unraveling in real time, one where every second mattered. The baby needed food, warmth, and immediate medical attention, and the little girl needed safety, protection, and someone willing to step in before the streets consumed her, too. But Daniel also knew, with a clarity that cut deep, that if he handled this wrong, if he moved too fast or leaned too hard on his authority, she might run, and if she ran, there was no guarantee he would ever find her again. In that moment, he made a choice. He would not approach this as a police officer processing another case file. He would approach it as a father, as a human being who could not, and would not, walk away. So instead of reaching for his radio, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the granola bar he kept tucked away for long shifts. Slowly, deliberately, he unwrapped it and held it out without taking a step closer. The girl froze for a moment, her eyes darting between his face and the food in his hand, torn between suspicion and need, before finally taking the smallest, cautious step forward. That was how it began, the first fragile thread of trust woven through a tangle of fear and uncertainty. What Daniel couldn't have known in that moment was that the words she would speak after taking her first bite of food, after that first shuddering sigh of relief, would haunt him for the rest of his life. They would break his heart in a way no training could ever prepare him for, and they would set into motion a chain of events that would change not only her life and her baby brother's, but his own forever. Sometimes the most extraordinary acts of kindness don't come from people with endless resources or perfect circumstances, but from those who simply refuse to look away. That morning, a police officer could have walked past, could have written it off as just another case file, another sad story swallowed by a long career of tragedies. But he didn't. He chose to stop, to listen, to see, not just a struggling child and her baby brother, but two fragile lives on the edge of being lost. And in making that choice, he became the difference between despair and hope, between abandonment and a second chance. That single decision altered not only the course of their lives but his as well. In a world that often feels rushed, distracted, and self-absorbed, where compassion is too easily drowned out by noise, this story serves as a reminder. A single act of genuine care can become the turning point in someone's entire existence. You don't have to solve every problem, or fix every broken piece of someone's world, to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is showing up, refusing to turn away, and choosing humanity over indifference. This was more than a fleeting moment between strangers on a forgotten street. It was proof that compassion still breathes in this world, that love can grow out of the unlikeliest places, and that sometimes the family we choose to build through kindness is stronger, more enduring, and more powerful than the one we lose.